So this is Module 2, which I've entitled Getting Ready to Model. Because even though you're probably itching to open Oracle Policy Modeler and start working with it, there are a couple of things that I've learned over the years that are better learned at the beginning than learned halfway through or later on. You saw in my little demonstration in the previous module that the basis for modeling is Microsoft Word or Microsoft Excel or both. And that is obviously a huge advantage for us because we don't have to learn any new technology. Most of us in some form or another have been exposed to these products for a long time. But it leads to a certain amount of, which I've described here as irrational exuberance, is we know how to use it, so there's a tendency to jump right in. And of course, if you're just having fun at home or at your desk and playing around with the tool, there's nothing wrong with jumping in. But if you're working together with your teammates on a project, jumping in can have downsides that make it a little harder to work together or make it a little harder to see what it is you've actually done. I'm going to break this down into 2 or 3 separate things. The first thing, and we'll see this in the demo shortly, is you may want to switch off some of Word's more advanced features. There's one in particular that I sometimes switch off. It's called autocorrect, or autocorrect as you type. So as you're typing certain pieces of text, maybe you'll find that Word will change the spelling of something, or will add a space, or maybe even will replace a piece of text. Perhaps the quote marks that you put in will be replaced with funny quote marks that Word thinks look nicer. Why do I suggest you change some of these? They're not a requirement, but they will make your document easy to read. And in a larger team, if you have people who are working with different versions of Word, sometimes you'll get issues with, well, Word doesn't support this in this version. So by coming back to something quite simple, it makes it easier to manage. We'll see this in the demo in a minute, but people tend to forget that when you build a project in Oracle Intelligent Advisor, you're not limited to one document. You can have as many documents as you want. You can name them any which way you please as long as it's a valid name for Microsoft Word. And you'll notice in this screenshot, I've actually added some folders. And I would thoroughly recommend that you get into the habit of adding folders and giving them names that are agreed upon by everybody in your project. You might even go so far as to build a list of authorized folder names so that when everybody creates a new project, you play by the same rules. This to me is common sense. This is one that we have a tendency to overlook. Let's imagine that you have 3 Word documents in your project. Good practice would tell me that even inside that document, I would be well placed if I put a header at the top of the document. I explain what this document is for, who wrote it, why did I write it. For example, in a project scenario, maybe in the description I'd say, this is as per requirement number 3. And maybe I'd even reference another document. Notice the second bullet point. It's Word. Just because you're using it in Oracle Intelligent Advisor doesn't transform it into something else. It's Word. So if you have a long document, consider adding a table of contents. Consider spreading it out over more pages to make it easier to read. Just because you're writing your business policy in a Word document doesn't mean that it shouldn't be readable and, I should say, easy on the eyes. This won't come as a surprise. When you're working with Oracle Policy Automation and when you're in your modeler and you open a Word document, you'll notice that the Word document has an extra toolbar and has some extra styles. They're there to help. Some of them are mandatory, as we'll see in a minute, and they change the way the document behaves. And some of them are there for your own benefit. They'll help you organize your text. So although you're probably itching to get in and start working with your project, let's take a few moments to go into Microsoft Word and focus on how the word experience changes inside Oracle Policy Modeling, but also how you can use it to your advantage. So this demonstration is going to focus on styles, documents, folders, and generally getting more familiar with the toolbars that you'll see inside Microsoft Word. So this is the project that I built in the previous chapter. And again, I'll stress the point is, for now, we're not focusing on the details of what this project is. We'll come to that in just a moment. This is just our guided tour of things we need to think about. I'm going to just reference the fact that I can add multiple Word and Excel documents, and I can create new folders. And I'm going to double click on my first Word document, and up pops Microsoft Word. You'll notice really that it is just Microsoft Word, with one small exception, is that I now have a toolbar on here entitled Policy Modeling. So Policy Modeling gives me access to a set of functionality and a set of formatting. I want you to notice, for example, over here I have buttons like conclusion, and all of these we'll talk about in due course, plus the button that is probably the most important to us shortly will be validating the work that we've done. So every time you do something interesting with Oracle Intelligent Advisor, you're going to be clicking on that button. But for now, I'm going to take a step away from this toolbar and actually head to the Home tab, which you can see me clicking now. And I just want to bring to your attention that if you open the styles, and I look at the list of styles, you'll notice that there's a bunch of styles here that have a prefix OPM. So many of these styles are what are actually hiding behind buttons like this. So when I click this button, for example, it will apply a style to a piece of text in my document. So these styles, like I said before, some of them are really important and will change how your document works. But some of them are actually really just there for the purposes of making your life easier. For example, there's one here called OPM heading. So I could type in now, for example, first rule. It's just a heading. But it gets me into the habit of writing a heading before I write a rule. Because if I start writing rules but don't leave space for headings and comments, very quickly the document will start to become very dense and, quite frankly, very hard to read. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back to my policy modeling toolbar up there on the right, and I'm going to type in another piece of text. The pilot is authorized and to fly the plane if, and I'll just correct my spelling mistake. And I'm going to click that button that I pointed out a moment ago, just to give you an example. Notice how as soon as I clicked it, the formatting changed. This is just to remind you that the majority of these buttons in this special toolbar change the way things are formatted. And over the course of the next few chapters, you're going to become familiar with a bunch of them, and that one I just clicked on the left-hand side is one of the most important, and we'll describe what it means in a moment. But this is all about familiarity with Microsoft Word. As I mentioned earlier, you're still free to use things like tables of contents and other features in Word that help you organize your work. I'm going to close this file. I'm going to save it. And you'll notice immediately, as soon as I save my work, the modeling tool has some advice for me. It says, well, Richard, what you've written doesn't really make any sense. And frankly, I'd be in agreement, is I didn't finish what I was writing. So be aware that the modeling tool is also it can see what you're doing in Microsoft Word, and sometimes will have its opinion or will give you a warning or an error message. So these two are very tightly integrated, Word and Oracle Policy Modeling. So that's it for the demonstration of styles, documents, and Microsoft Word in general.